What happens when Hollywood's most transformed bad boy walks into what should be a friendly late-night chat and finds himself facing a host more interested in tearing him down than building him up? In just 35 seconds, one loaded question would expose the ugly truth behind the cameras and turn a simple interview into television's most shocking meltdown. Mark Wahlberg sat in the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert, the studio lights casting sharp shadows across his weathered face. He had come to promote his latest film, expecting the usual banter about Boston, workouts, and maybe a few laughs about his past. What he got instead was something far more sinister. Colbert leaned back in his chair, that signature smirk playing across his lips as he shuffled his note cards. The audience was still settling from their applause when he launched into what seemed like an innocent enough opening. So Mark, you have had quite the journey from rapper to actor to producer. But I have to ask, when you look back at some of your earlier comments and actions, do you ever feel like maybe you got away with things that others might not have? The question hung in the air like smoke. Mark shifted slightly, his jaw tightening just enough for those watching closely to notice. Stephen, I think we all make mistakes when we are young. The important thing is learning from them and trying to do better every day. But Colbert was not satisfied with that answer. He pressed forward, his voice taking on that mock innocent tone that his audience loved, but that could cut like a blade. Oh, absolutely, we all make mistakes. But some mistakes are bigger than others, are they not? I mean, when most of us mess up as teenagers, we do not usually end up with hate crime charges. The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Mark's hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests, now gripped them tightly. I have addressed that many times, Stephen. I was a different person then. I have spent my entire adult life trying to make up for the stupid things I did as a kid. Colbert nodded, but his eyes gleamed with something that was not understanding or compassion. It was the look of a predator who had found wounded prey. Sure. But here's what I find interesting. You have built this whole image as this tough guy from the streets who made good, right? The American dream and all that. But how much of that tough guy image is real versus just really good marketing? Mark leaned forward slightly, his voice remaining steady, but with an edge creeping in. I do not think there is anything fake about working construction jobs to support my family or getting up at 4 a.m. to train before filming. That is not marketing, Stephen. That is just life. The host chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, come on, Mark. We both know that Hollywood loves a redemption story. Bad boy makes good, sells tickets. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling? Are you still that reformed character, or do you slip back into old patterns? Something shifted in Mark's posture. The politeness was still there, but barely. I'm not sure what you are getting at, Stephen. What I am getting at is this, Colbert said, leaning forward now, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper that made his audience lean in. You have made a career out of playing tough guys, but when it comes to real accountability, real consequences, you seem to have a pretty good track record of skating by. Some might say you have been given opportunities that others, particularly people of color who made similar mistakes, never got. The accusation hit the studio like a thunderclap. Mark's face flushed red, and for a moment, the transformation was visible. The polished movie star facade cracked, revealing something rawer underneath. Now hold on just a minute, Mark said, his voice rising. You do not know anything about what I have done privately to make amends, or how I have tried to give back to communities I hurt. You are sitting there in your fancy suit, in your comfortable studio, making accusations about things you know nothing about. Colbert held up his hands in mock surrender, that smirk growing wider. Hey, I am just asking the questions that I think our viewers want answered. Is not that what journalism is about? Journalism? Mark laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is not journalism, Stephen. This is a hit job. You brought me on here under false pretenses so you could grandstand and make yourself look good by tearing me down. The audience was dead quiet now. Even Colbert seemed momentarily taken aback by the directness of the accusation. But he recovered quickly. Mark, I think you might be taking this a little too personally. These are fair questions for someone in your position. Fair questions? Mark stood up slightly in his chair. You want to talk about fair? Let me ask you something, Stephen. How many mistakes did you make when you were young? How many times did you say something stupid or do something you regretted? The difference is, your mistakes probably did not end up in police reports because you grew up with privilege. I never had. The tables were turning, and Colbert did not like it. His smirk faltered. Well, I certainly never. Never what? Mark interrupted. Never got in trouble? Never said something offensive? Never hurt anyone's feelings? Or did you just never get caught? Colbert's face had gone pale under the studio lights. the master of quick wit and clever comebacks, found himself stumbling over his words for the first time anyone could remember. I think you are trying to deflect here, Mark. This is not about me. Oh, but it is about you, Stephen. You sit up there on your high horse every night, judging people, making jokes at their expense, acting like you are some moral authority. But what gives you the right? Mark was fully engaged now, his Boston accent thickening with emotion. The audience could feel the energy in the room shifting like the air before a storm. You know what I think this really is? I think you are jealous. Here I am, a high school dropout from Dorchester, and I have built something real. I have created jobs. I have made movies that people actually want to see. I have raised a family. And you? You sit behind this desk making fun of people who are actually out there doing things. Colbert tried to regain control, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when guests got too heated. Mark, I think we should probably take a step back here. This is getting a little heated, and do not patronize me. Mark cut him off. You started this. You wanted to play hardball. So let's play hardball. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability. How many careers have you damaged with your little jokes? How many people have you hurt for a cheap laugh? The host looked around desperately, as if searching for a producer to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. This was live television at its most raw and unpredictable. Mark, I am a comedian. Making jokes is literally my job. Hiding behind comedy when you get called out is cowardly, Stephen. You know what takes real courage? Admitting when you are wrong, apologizing when you hurt people, actually trying to make things right instead of just making jokes about it. Colbert's composure was cracking. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. I have apologized when I have made mistakes. Mark laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. Have you? Or did you just make another joke about having to apologize? There is a difference between actually taking responsibility and just going through the motions because your publicist told you to. The audience was completely silent now. Some were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the entertainment they had signed up for. This was something else entirely. You know what your problem is, Stephen? You have never had to face real consequences for anything. You have never had to look someone in the eye who you really hurt and try to make it right. You just hide behind your writers and your producers and your network. Colbert's face was flushed now, his famous composure completely gone. That is not fair, Mark. You do not know anything about my personal life or what I have dealt with. Fair? Mark's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to ambush me with questions you knew would upset me just so you could get a reaction for your show? Was it fair to pretend this was going to be a normal interview when you clearly had an agenda from the start? The host was scrambling now, looking more flustered than anyone had ever seen him. We always ask tough questions. That is what good interviews. Stop lying, Mark said flatly. This was not a tough interview. This was you trying to embarrass me on national television. The difference is, I am not going to sit here and let you do it. Colbert made one last desperate attempt to regain control of his own show. Mark, I think maybe we should wrap this up. Clearly, this is not going the way either of us. No, Mark said firmly. You do not get to decide when this is over. You started this conversation, now you are going to finish it. You wanted to talk about my past? Let's talk about it. But let's also talk about your present. The host looked like he was about to be sick. His signature confidence had evaporated completely. You sit here every night acting like you are fighting for justice and equality. But what have you actually done? What have you actually sacrificed? You make millions of dollars a year making fun of people less fortunate than you. How is that fighting for justice? Mark was on a roll now, and there was no stopping him. At least when I messed up, I was a stupid kid who did not know better. You are a grown man who should know better, but you keep doing the same thing night after night. You keep hurting people for money. How is that better than what I did? Colbert's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The great communicator had been rendered speechless by someone he had clearly underestimated. I have spent the last 20 years of my life trying to make up for the mistakes I made as a teenager. What have you done to make up for the mistakes you make every single night on this show? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Colbert looked around the studio desperately, but there was nowhere to hide. His own audience was staring at him, waiting for an answer that never came. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Colbert's mouth moved, but no words came out. Mark watched him struggle, and for a moment, there was almost pity in his eyes. You know what, Stephen? I actually feel sorry for you. You have all this power, all this influence, and this is what you do with it? You tear people down instead of building them up? The host finally found his voice, but it was weak and shaky. Mark, I think there has been a misunderstanding here. I never intended. Stop, Mark said quietly. but with such authority that Colbert immediately fell silent. "Just stop. We both know exactly what you intended. You thought you could bring me on here, push my buttons, get me to lose my temper, and then you would look like the reasonable one, while I look like the angry thug. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You got your reaction, but not the one you wanted." Mark stood up from his chair, but he did not storm off. Instead, he looked directly into the camera. "You know what I learned growing up in Dorchester? I learned that bullies come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them wear leather jackets and hang out on street corners. Others wear expensive suits and hide behind desks. But they are all the same. They pick on people they think cannot fight back." He turned back to Colbert, who was slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. "The difference is, I grew up. I learned that being tough is not about hurting other people. It is about standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it means calling out someone who has more power than you do." Colbert made one weak attempt to salvage the situation. "Mark, maybe we can start over. I think we got off on the wrong foot here." Mark shook his head slowly. "No, Stephen, this is not about getting off on the wrong foot. This is about who you really are when you think the cameras are not rolling. Except they are rolling, are they not? And everyone can see exactly what kind of person you are." The host looked around frantically, finally spotting a producer gesturing wildly from behind the cameras. But Mark was not done. "You want to know what real accountability looks like? It looks like admitting when you are wrong. It looks like apologizing without making excuses. It looks like actually changing your behavior instead of just talking about it." Mark began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and calm. "I came here tonight to talk about my new movie, to maybe have some laughs, to connect with people who might enjoy the work I have been doing. Instead, you decided to turn this into some kind of trial where you got to play judge and jury." Colbert was sweating now, his makeup starting to run under the hot studio lights. "Mark, please let me explain." "Explain what? How you planned this? How you knew exactly which buttons to push? How you thought you could humiliate me and I would just sit there and take it?" Mark placed his microphone on the side table next to his chair. "Here is the thing, Stephen. I am not that scared kid from Boston anymore. I am not going to be intimidated by someone who thinks their college degree makes them better than me. I have worked too hard and come too far to let anyone, including you, make me feel small." The audience was completely transfixed now. This was not just television anymore. This was something real and raw and completely unscripted. "You know what takes real courage, Stephen? Standing up in front of millions of people and admitting that you were wrong. Owning your mistakes instead of making jokes about them. Actually caring about the people you hurt instead of just caring about your ratings." Mark looked one more time at the camera, his voice calm and measured. "To anyone watching this who has ever made a mistake, who has ever been judged for their past, who has ever been made to feel like they do not deserve forgiveness or a second chance, I want you to know something. You are not defined by your worst moment. You are defined by what you do after that moment, how you learn, how you grow, how you try to make things right." He turned back to Colbert one final time. "As for you, Stephen, I hope someday you figure out the difference between holding people accountable and just being cruel. Because right now, you are just being cruel." With that, Mark Wahlberg walked off the stage, leaving Stephen Colbert sitting alone at his desk, speechless and exposed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the host's complete meltdown. For the first time in his career, the man who made his living with words had absolutely nothing to say. The studio audience sat in stunned silence as Mark disappeared backstage, his footsteps echoing in the quiet studio. Somewhere in the control room, a producer was probably screaming, but none of that mattered now. The damage was done. The mask had been pulled away, and everyone had seen what was underneath. Stephen Colbert, the great satirist, the champion of justice, the voice of reason, sat alone in his chair, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him look before, and the cameras captured every second of it.